Jakub Izdebski, Interia Film. Ze mną jest Christopher Hampton, scenarzysta filmowy, dwukrotny laureat Oscara za Niebezpieczne Związki i Syna. Już niedługo będzie gościem festiwalu Script Fiesta w Warszawie, gdzie razem z Agnieszką Holland pokażą ich film Całkowite, zaćmienie. Total Eclipse, an adaptation of your play, will be shown at Script Fiesta Festival, and you also have a conversation with Agnieszka Holland after it. And for me, it was a surprise that you wrote this play when you were just 21, and it wasn't your first play. So
it's true. It was my first. I always think of it as my first real play because somehow my very first play, which was rather successful, I hadn't really taken it seriously. I'd written it very quickly before I went to university, and so I was slightly surprised by how successful it was. I then wrote this play, Total Eclipse, which took me over a year, and I really worked hard on it, and felt very committed to it. And of course, when it opened in London in 1968, it was a disaster. They all the people who had liked my first play didn't like it at all, and it was very it was a good kind of lesson to have early on in your career, because I knew it was a better play than the first play, and yet it had not been understood by the critics in that way. So slowly, over the next 10, 15 years, people began to do it in other countries and in other places, and it gathered a certain success, and then we did it again in London in 1981, and this time it was very well received. It was very successful. So you just have to, you can't really believe what happens immediately. You have to, wait and see. Is the lesson of Total Eclipse.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is that it was the same with the movie, because the reviews when it premiered were so-so, but as Agnieszka Holland said, after a few years, they were only better and better.
Well, it's very interesting that I had one of the most influential people in my life was the agent I first had in London, whose name was Margaret Ramsey. And when she was consoling me for the failure of the play when it first came out, she said, the thing about us, something new and original, is that there's always something ugly about it. And people react to that and kind of get upset by that, because she said there's something about I suppose progressing your art, which kind of confuses people, or somehow annoys them, or as she said, or presents them with something ugly. So maybe there's something of that in it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we talk about the movie, I'm very curious how you were writing your play when you were 21, because you based it on letters between Valera and Rimbaud, and there was no internet, no databases.
I did a lot of research in actually. I wrote it in. If you were a languages student at Oxford, you had the option to take your third year and go abroad, go to the country whose language you were studying. So at the end of 1966, I went to Hamburg to spend a year trying to improve my German. But I wasn't very happy there, so I kind of hitchhiked to Paris, and I was in Paris for 6 months, I suppose, doing all kinds of jobs, unloading vegetables from camion in Les Halles, and picking up bits of translation jobs and so on to support myself. And during that time, I was able to do all the research that I needed to do, because they were much more liberal than in the Bibliothèque Nationale. You just went in and spoke to somebody and they helped you. Now I think you have to, be an accredited scholar and all kinds of qualifications before they'll let you loose in a place like that. But I was able to find a large number of books and a lot of detail about their lives together. They weren't together for very long, but it was very, very well documented. And right at the beginning, right when I started, I made the decision to try to be as accurate, truthful as possible, and not invent anything. Just tell the story of their lives, of their relationship, brief as it was. And so the research period was very important to me. And eventually I went back to England in the summer and wrote the play, which I think I finished at the end of '67. And then I had to enter my final year at university, which meant doing all the work that I hadn't done in previous years.
I know it. Yeah, and moving forward, for every person who writes, not only screenwriters, playwrights, but also journalists, it's sometimes hard to go back to something you wrote many, many years ago, and you did this when you adapted your play into a screenplay. So how was it for you to write this?
Well, it was a very interesting thing that happened while we were first doing the play, because as you've said, I was very young. My director was 2 or 3 years older than me only, so we were both very young, and the actors were young, and it seemed to us that as we got closer to the opening, that there were kind of 2 or 3 things wrong with the play. So we asked the artistic director of the theatre, William Gaskell, to come and watch a run-through in the morning, and afterwards he took us out to lunch, the director and me, and we bombarded him with questions. We said, should we do this, should we do that, what should we do? And he said a thing which nobody would ever say now. It's a completely implausible thing for anybody to say, but he said to me, listen, you're very young, there are things wrong with the play, but you should watch it with an audience, and they will explain to you what's wrong with it. And then when you in a year or two, you'll be able to rewrite it. And it was absolutely true. I mean, the thing was that the play was done in '68, and then maybe, I think in the beginning of the '80s, '81, David Hare, my writer friend, decided that he would like to revive the play, and I found at that point it was very easy to fix all the things that I couldn't have fixed when we were in the middle of doing the play for the first time. So I think this is a problem that people have with, especially for theatre writers now. They get workshopped all the time. They write a new play, it has to go to the workshop, and then they have to rewrite it, and then they have to workshop it again. And it's not necessarily going to improve it, because you can't really see the faults immediately. It takes a little bit of time for for everything to mature, and then for you to be able to adjust things. Of course, then doing it as a film was a completely different exercise altogether. And I tried not to think about. I tried to rethink it as a movie.
And when did you start when did the idea to make this into a film came to you?
There were various approaches about making a film, but eventually there was an approach from a French producer, Jean-Pierre Ramsay, who really wanted to do it, and so we started. He paid me to write a screenplay, which I did, and then it was quite a long process because first of all we began to cast it, and originally our cast was River Phoenix as Rambo and John Malkovich as Verlaine, and then quite suddenly River Phoenix died when he was 23 in Los Angeles. I mean, like a few months up before we were supposed to make the film, and so the whole thing kind of disappeared. And I worked with a number of directors actually. I worked with Carol Rice and Werner Herzog and Volker Schlöndorff at various stages. And then so everything was after River Phoenix died, everything sort of ground to a halt. And so it often happens with films that there comes a point where you think, oh, it's not going to happen, it won't happen. But then Jean-Pierre showed the screenplay to Agnieszka, and she kind of made it happen very, very quickly. Is my memory. She kind of came in, took the script, decided to offer it to Leonardo DiCaprio, and before we knew where we were, the whole thing we were all in Paris, and the thing was underway, and it was very enjoyable. Couple of months to the making of the film, the pre-production and the making of the film.
Mm-hmm. When we spoke about Florence Ziller's son and the father, you were on the set. Were you also on the set of Total Eclipse?
Not all the time, but I was whenever I wanted to be, and I did want to be there quite a lot because I was very interested in watching Leonardo, because he was clearly a remarkable actor. And he's one of the few actors I've worked with who will do 5 different takes and do 5 different things, 5 different performances, and they're all quite interesting. So it's quite hard to work out which one to choose. So I was very interested in watching him, and then he persuaded Agnieszka to cast me in a small part in the play. So that meant that I had to be there a bit more, and make my only acting appearance. Mm-hmm. So that was quite fun. I enjoyed that.
Oh, and how is it for a screenwriter creator when you see a young actor like Leonardo DiCaprio? It was his first big time in career, because he was right after getting Oscar nominated for What's in Gilbert Grape, and through years you see that he's not that star of one film, of one Oscar nomination, but a real big star, and today he's one of a few real film stars.
Yes, yeah. Well, you could see that it was going to happen, and I haven't seen him. I mean, I've spoken to him on the phone once or twice, but I haven't seen him since a year or so after Total Eclipse came out. We met in Paris again, and he'd just finished making this film called Titanic, which he had a horrible time on, and he said, "I'm never going to do a film like that again." I said, "What was wrong with it?" He said, "I'm never going to do a film where I have to run down a corridor shouting, 'There's a fire in engine room 4.'" He said, "It's just stupid." And he's remarkably enough, he has never done a film like that again. He's done a lot of very, very interesting stuff. He had the good luck or Scorsese had the intelligence and the good taste to see what a good actor he was. So he's had a wonderful career. Not the kind of career you would have expected when you came out of Titanic the first time.
Oh. Yeah, I remember, because I was in school back then, and all the girls in my class, they were in love with Leonardo DiCaprio, and all the boys hated him because movies with DiCaprio are for girls only. Yeah, but going back to Total Eclipse, how do you remember working with Agnieszka Holland on this movie?
I thought she was very good to work with. She was very, she's always very straightforward, says what she thinks, and is very clear. That's what you really want when you're working with a director. What a writer sort of is frightened of is people saying, "Well, I'm not sure. What do you think?" And it's great to work with somebody who says, "Well, it should be like this. It should be like that," because then you can, if you disagree with them, you can disagree with them. You can't really disagree with somebody who says, "Well, I don't know." So I liked her positivity. I think we had more conversations during the editing than because she felt it was much more. The script was kind of a flashback, but it moved between the present and the past much more. In my first intention, much more fluidly and much more often. And I think she was probably right to simplify it and say, this is the story, and we'll set it out like this, and we'll frame it. But we won't jump about all over the place in the way that the screenplay originally did.
Yeah, and were you considering directing this movie yourself, because it was 1995, so it was your first movie, Carrington. It was in Cannes. It was very well received. So was that an option?
No. What was interesting was going to Telluride, the film festival in Telluride in Colorado, and screening Carrington and Total Eclipse in the same festival, and you know, Telluride is a very open atmosphere, and everybody tells you what they think of of everything you're doing. And as we said earlier, I think Total Eclipse was rather shocking to that particular audience. They found it quite a bit too strong, and so there was some mixed, a mixed reception going on for Total Eclipse. But I never really imagined directing it. Although I sort of half jokingly said later on that I would quite like to do another version of it in French, because I find it slightly embarrassing that it's a film about two great French writers, but it's in English.
Yeah. Do you have
so it'd be interesting it would be interesting to do it in French. I'd rewrite the script a bit, but it'd be interesting.
Yeah. Do you have someone in mind, an actor who would play Valerian? Or
No, it's not really. I mean, I'm very busy, so it's not really serious project at the moment. But I have thought about it occasionally over the years.
Okay, so yeah, and we are talking about Total Eclipse because of Script Fiesta festival, first Polish festival dedicated to art of screenplay, and I was wondering if you do you have any suggestions or tips for someone who is at the beginning of his road as a screenwriter? What would you say to that person?
Read a lot of scripts. Read a lot of good scripts. It's quite, because the experience of seeing a film that you like is one thing, but it's often quite surprising to read the script and to see how, I don't know, it's reading film scripts is a difficult art because often a good film, when you read it, doesn't look very good. It doesn't seem very interesting. It doesn't. But so it's hard to tell what it is that translates well to the screen. So at the beginning of my career, it was very interesting to go and see The Servant, Joseph Losey's The Servant, and then to read Harold Pinter's script and to see how brilliantly Harold Pinter had constructed it to have the effect that it has on you in the cinema. So you don't think about that when you're watching the film, but when you read the script, you do start to think about those things. And if you're writing a screenplay, you have to think about those things.
Yeah, I had something like this when I read Aaron Sorkin's The Social Network. I don't know if you remember first scene. They are speaking very, very quick, very, very quickly, and there is so much text in it, and it's 4 minutes long. And when I'm reading the script, I see it's 8 pages. It should be 8 minutes. When they made it into 4 minutes, and that's why it's so energetic.
Yeah. Well, it's often, I mean, I've worked quite a lot with Stephen Frears, and often. Not often, but it's not unusual for him to say after a take, "Can we do another one twice as fast?" And it's true that that does generate a certain energy, which comes through on the screen.
Okay. So, sir, thank you very much for your time. It was wonderful to speak with you again. To był Christopher Hampton, a ja zapraszam do serwisu Film Interia i na festiwal Script Fiesta w Warszawie.